Welcome to Authors at Drucker. I'm Dave Specht, Director of the Global Family Business Institute at the Drucker School of Management. At the Drucker School, we aspire to become the global meeting place for the world's most influential business-owning families. This conversation today represents progress in our achievement of that objective. Authors at Drucker is an interview series where we feature top authors that write about issues impacting business-owning families. Authors at Drucker is made possible from the generous sponsorship from the James E. Hughes Jr. Foundation. The foundation is dedicated to advancing the study of family governance and generational well-being. We at the Drucker School feel very aligned and very grateful to Jay Hughes and his foundation. A side note, part of the generosity of Jay and his foundation is going to help us to bring some of this work to Africa. I'm headed to Africa tomorrow afternoon. So again, a special thanks to Jay Hughes and his foundation. On our last Authors at Drucker, we featured a book called Anti-Time Management by Richie Norton. If you missed it, I would encourage you to go to our website or to our YouTube channel to watch or listen to that. Before we begin, I wanted to just mention a couple things I'm excited about. And we will get to the star of the show in just a second here. The first one is our Certificate in Advising Family Enterprises. This is a program that we typically partner with financial institutions to train groups of advisors, whether it's a private bank, CPA firms, investment houses. We're really excited about that. If you have a firm that is advising family enterprises and want to get better and more effective, more efficient at navigating the non-financial challenges that they have, please feel free to reach out to me and we can talk about what that might be and how we might bring this training to your firm. We've also launched our Generational Wealth Masterclass. We are currently in conversations with people in all parts of the world to bring this Generational Wealth Masterclass content. Again, this is a collaboration with Jay Hughes, and some of the topics that we discuss are navigating financially diverse relationships, appreciating and onboarding in-laws, redefining wealth. We actually have 25 different conversations all around the non-financial challenges that financial success creates. Again, if you're interested in learning more about the Generational Wealth Masterclass, please feel free to reach out to me. And now we'll get to the star of our show. Today's guest is Dr. Alan Weiss. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing so that you can see his smiling face here. Alan is the founder and CEO of Marketing Profs LLC, one of the largest B2B marketing training, consulting, and event companies, helping large companies, teams, and individuals execute marketing campaigns that drive actual results. His work can be seen in brands such as Intel, Texas Instruments, and insurance companies like AIG and others. Alan served as the director of Mindful USC and currently serves in a similar role here at Claremont Graduate University. Alan, thanks so much for joining us today on Authors at Drucker.
Thank you for having me. I'm sorry my wife couldn't be here because she's on jury duty.
I am as well,
Yeah.
but she's doing a good thing.
Yeah.
So,
Great.
yeah, we were supposed to be joined by Debbie, but she was called away to jury duty today, so we're going to have to figure out if we can move on without her and
Yeah.
see if the show can go on.
Yeah.
Alan, perhaps the best place to begin is to get the backstory of how you became interested in brands and how they market. And again, today's topic is the brand benefits playbook.
Right.
How'd you get
Well,
interested in it?
yeah. Well, when I started my career, my first job academically was at Stanford University, and they asked me to teach the basic intro to marketing. And what happened was, as a new faculty member, I never thought about any of this stuff before, but I had to learn how to teach, about, segmentation and basic sort of things. And over time, I became very interested in the whole process. And I started kind of like I read Theodore Levitt's article where he said people don't want a quarter-inch drill, they want a quarter-inch hole.
Mhm.
And I thought that was really cool and interesting. And so I didn't have any words for it. I just called them factors or something like that. And I started doing a lot of consulting work, and I was using this. And that's how I kind of got interested in it. It was a combination of teaching it, but also doing consulting with the same idea. And I just got, over time, I started working with big companies, especially Northrop Grumman and some of these other companies that taught me more about competition and other things. And so I started folding all this stuff into the way that I think about positioning, et cetera. And so that's the backstory.
So one of the key points, as you mentioned in the book, is the focus on benefits to customers and not necessarily product features. I'm curious, in all the studies that you've done, why is there such an allure for companies or people to talk about features rather than benefits?
Well, that's a really interesting question. I think it's just easier for people. You know, I think it's, well, especially I've worked with a lot of technology companies and finance companies, and it's almost like they're impressed with what the technology does. So everybody's looking backwards into the company, and they don't think about customers at all. And I think it's just an allure, and especially if they have product managers in marketing where they're working with the technology folks, it forces them to think in terms of just product features and things like that. You know.
So in thinking about either, the focus on features or the focus on benefits, like how does the mindset change when you see companies make that shift?
Oh, well, first of all, when they start thinking about benefits, their whole world kind of changes. And part of the reason is because you start seeing how people make trade-offs on benefits, and that changes the way that you understand, your market entirely. And so I think, that's been my experience when I've shown people how benefits work. And then they immediately start seeing, okay, well, some people want this and some people want these benefits. And that becomes the foundation for segmentation. And and especially if they do a perceptual map, then they see everything completely different because they understand how customers perceive them rather than like the way that they perceive customers.
Hmm. Exactly. So before we dive into some of these principles, I want to just see who's doing this well.
Well, there's a couple of companies. One of the companies that does this really well is Arm& and Hammer. Arm& and Hammer, used to make baking soda, right? I mean, that's what everybody knew them from. But they understood that from a customer standpoint, it was really about something that reduces odor, okay? And once they understood it was reduces odor, they were able to like then do brand extensions and go into other markets. And now if you go to Arm& and Hammer's website, you'll see that they're in toothpaste, kitty litter, etc. It just goes mouthwash, it just goes all the way because they've been focusing on benefits. Okay, if they
Hmm.
would have just focused on a baking soda, they'd be known as a baking soda company, and that would be it. You know, and
So
so
did they always have that perspective, or was it a strategic shift? Was it someone that kind of woke them up to that, or do you know the
Well,
backstory on that?
yeah, no, I'm not sure what the backstory is on this, but Theodore Levitt, when he wrote Marketing Myopia back in 1960, he identified a number of companies who, by virtue of just the way that they approached the market, it was usually pretty high up. It wasn't some low person like in marketing, but somebody near the top, started thinking about we need to be more customer focused. And once you start getting into that and you flip yourself around, then it immediately takes you into growth paths. And so that's one of the things we talk about is that a benefit approach helps you see growth a lot easier.
Very interesting. Yeah, there's a family company, W.L. Gore,
Yeah.
that I feel like maybe does a good job of this as well. You start to see Gore-Tex on
Yeah.
in all kinds of different applications, and they seem to have figured that out as well.
Yeah.
Um, Talk about financial services. You mentioned on our pre-call Liberty Mutual.
Oh,
Tell us a
yeah.
little bit about Liberty Mutual and what makes them good at this.
Well, okay. Well, Liberty Mutual is a really interesting story because they're in a very, very, very competitive market, okay, in life insurance and auto insurance, et cetera. Okay. And what they did, and this is really, I think this is really interesting. What they did was they understood that there was a segment of customers out of this whole market of all of these State Farm and Allstate, and just goes on and on and on, a segment who cared about, and this is a benefit, the ability to customize. Okay. And, customization has been around for centuries. I mean, people go to Spotify so they can customize their music. It's not a big deal. And they wanted customization at a reasonable price. And they turned that into a tagline, pay for only what you need.
Hmm.
Okay. Customize your car insurance. So you only pay for what you need. And they do it over and over and over again. And what's interesting about it is that I've read articles by people like State Farm who said, but everybody customizes car insurance. Yeah, that's true. Maybe you do, but you don't tell people that.
Yeah, the customer doesn't know. And if the customer
Yeah,
doesn't know, you don't
exactly.
actually do that then.
Exactly. That's what I mean by these people not only understand the market, but they also promote themselves that way. And now they have like one of the highest recall measures. If anybody says I need to like customize, they just go, okay, Liberty Mutual, done.
Yeah. I have an 11-year-old daughter
Yeah.
who her name is Liberty. So much to the bane of her existence, every time
Yeah.
someone gets introduced to her, it's Liberty,
Yeah.
Liberty, Liberty. So
Yeah.
she may not recognize the customized part, but she definitely catches the jingle.
Oh yeah. 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 Yeah.
In the book, you talk about different types of benefits
Right.
customers want from a brand. You talk about functional, symbolic, and experiential benefits. I wonder if we could take those maybe one at a time
Yeah,
and pull
sure.
those apart.
Yeah, so it turns out there's three types of benefits, and you might think of them easily as like the first type is called functional. And you might think of it as just what does it do for me? Okay. And that could be like, maybe solutions to problems and challenges, or saving resources, like, it could be time or money or psychological resources. Examples of functional would be like reliability. Okay. Doesn't break down and cause problems, and that conserves resources. Ease of installation or ease of use saves time, you know. Uh, and so technology companies are very big on functional, B2B companies. A lot of times they spend a lot of time with functional benefits, but there's also symbolic benefits. And symbolic benefits is like who I am as a person. Okay, that's something that expresses my coolness, my uniqueness, or maybe your moral values, etc., well-being. And so, like examples might be like Patagonia, for example, what they say, we're in the business of saving our home planet. Okay, and so if that's the kind of person you are, and that resonates with a lot of people. Or Nike said, just do it. Or St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital says, finding cures and saving the children. Okay. It's what's interesting about this is that AI, for example, which is really big these days, generative AI. The
Mhm.
biggest problem that they have is that there's a lot of people who want the symbolic benefit of kind of like saving the earth or saving humanity, etc. And they don't like AI because it doesn't provide that benefit. Okay. And so the third type is experiential, which is like really like how I feel. So you want something that evokes like nostalgia or excitement, empathy. It might be nice to look at or smell. Just think of the five senses. So a good example of this is like music. Okay. because it makes you feel a certain way, etc. It's experiential, but it can be like opening a box of technology. I mean, Apple made this very famous by opening the box on a video, and they made it really kind of a sensual experience of opening box. Remember that? Well, it
Absolutely.
turns out now everybody started like doing that. I mean, that's the biggest thing on YouTube.
Yeah,
It's just
unboxings. Yeah.
opening a box, um, having a meal.
Revolutionary, right?
Yeah,
Opening a
exactly.
box.
Yeah. And so, a wonderful meal could be, something that's very tasty, or it could be smell, it could be touch, it could be hear, etc. So these kinds of functional, symbolic, and experiential benefits. Now, I will just say that consumer markets tend to have all three, especially experiential and symbolic benefits, especially like clothes. They're very much into kind of like experiential. How does it feel on me, et cetera, et cetera. B2B companies tend to focus more on, well, they focus more on functional benefits, when in fact, that's not clear that the market focuses only on functional benefits. And this is why the first step when you're doing this is to understand what are the benefits that make up this market. Okay.
Yeah.
And it might be all functional benefits, but it might be also symbolic, and there might be experiential benefits as well. And so, but once you understand that, then when you're talking to people, you start listening for other things that are coming up, and you start realizing that there's just different types of benefits that are out there.
Well, to me, it's scary, Alan, to think of how many corporations are out there that are blind to these things and are not awake to exactly what their customers come to them for.
Right.
What benefits they're actually looking for, and it seems pretty intuitive, but my guess is there's a lot that are missing the boat.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, a simple way to do this is just asking people, okay, why? Just ask why questions. Okay, so you like
Mhm.
this. Why do you like this? They say, oh, because I like I like this about it. Okay, but why do you like that? This is just called laddering. And you can go too far with laddering because you can go all the way to like a goal or a pain, which is not a benefit. Nobody wants pain.
Yeah,
There's a lot of stuff in functional market and B2B where they say, what's the customer's pain? People don't want pain. They want a benefit. Okay.
yeah.
Uh, but you can, I mean, you can even do this for yourself. Look around the room right now and just look at anything that you say is really nice that you like, and just ask yourself, okay, so why did I buy that? Okay, why did you want that? Why did you want that? And you'll start seeing that all of a sudden, you buy this computer and you think, oh, it's because it's got all this memory, et cetera, et cetera. And before you know it, you're just saying, oh, because it makes me feel good. Okay.
Yeah.
Or makes things really easy for me. Okay.
How does
And
this play out? So we're talking about maybe consumer brands. How does this play out in personal brands? Because personal branding, I feel like, is bigger than it's ever been in terms of actually being an important part of the economy. These
yeah.
personal brands. So how do these benefits play into someone that's developing a personal brand?
Oh, well, um, personal brands, that's a whole different sort of a thing because, uh, but I mean, it's the same thing, right? I mean, like, why would somebody want you? Okay. You personally. Okay. It's probably not just, I mean, it's unless you're like an electrician who comes in and it's going to do something, but you can pretty much bet it's not going to be so much as what it does for me as to who am I as a person, or how do I feel? And so I think when you get into personal brands, you're getting much more into experiential and also symbolic, you know.
Well, this book has caused me to reflect on authors at Drucker
Yeah,
and the customer and what does the customer want. So
yeah,
I'll be curious to get some of that feedback from
yeah,
our listeners today.
yeah,
Um, Alan, in the book, you share an amazing quote from Peter Drucker on marketing. He said, "Marketing is the whole business
right.
seen from the customer's point of view." That seems to really emphasize your argument that brands should focus on the benefits to the customer. You talk about market reasons for taking the benefit approach. What are some of those reasons? In the book, you mentioned marketing myopia, seeing potential customers, and then
Right.
identifying paths to growth. I don't know if you want to take one of those or a couple of
Yeah,
them.
sure. I mean, the classic case when Theodore Levitt talked about this, he talked about marketing myopia. And I mean, he used this old industry of the what happened with the buggy whip industry, and they just saw themselves in the buggy whip industry. Okay, they didn't think of themselves in the transportation starter market industry, and so they didn't see when cars came along. They, automobiles, they just got blindsided by it. But that's an old thing. I mean, we talk about in the book about like what happened when Uber came in and just completely just havoc the entire taxi industry. How did they do this? Well, they basically just did it because people wanted more sense of control, right? This is a benefit, a sense of control. How do I get a sense of control? I can look on my app and I can see exactly where the taxi is. Okay. And anybody who ever paid for a taxi, you start feeling guilt at the end of it. And it's like, oh my God, do I have the right change, et cetera. You say, I'm going to use my credit card. The person says, no, it's got to be cash. And the whole thing,
Yeah.
they
Am I
just
being
made,
taken advantage
they,
of? Did they,
they
yeah,
just, they
all of
just made
that.
it, yeah, they just made it really easy. So it's just ease of use and having a sense of control. That was it. That was it. I mean, those were apparent to the taxis for years, but they never did anything. And so this is what marketing myopia is. But also, it helps anticipate new competition, because think about Coke. I mean, they used to be in Coca-Cola. Now they're in the refreshment business. Okay. Once you start understanding that this is about refreshment, then all of a sudden you go, oh my God, there's all these, I say Coke, that's just something that kind of like peps people up and, et cetera. Well, coffee peps people up and maybe coffee, running around the block. That's going to be doing it too. And all of a sudden you start seeing competition from other places. That doesn't scare you when you see this. It just makes you aware of exactly where competitors are likely to come from. But it also gives you ideas about how you might move to other parts of the market. So, but we also talk about like developing new product ideas. Which I think is really interesting. You see, what people don't realize is that a lot of the scientific instrumentation in the industry that has been done really has been done by customers, not by companies. And what happens is that a lot of scientific instrumentation, that people who use it just get frustrated because it doesn't have certain benefits. And we give examples of this. We don't have time to go into all of that, but we talk about like the iPhone, when the iPhone came out, because a lot of, for years when you teach marketing, just so you know, a lot of students come up to you and they say, oh, marketers don't know what they're doing. You can't ask people what they want because it's got to be produced by a company. Okay, this is the whole argument, and I've heard this for years. It's got to be produced by a company. But if you go through and look at like what did Apple come up with when it was going against BlackBerry, and you look at the benefits that people were getting, so they were getting like convenience, right? They took a music app and they combined it with like a phone. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
all right, so that's just convenience. It's like one-stop shopping. I mean, people have been going to malls and going to the target, the end stores for years because it's, they can get everything in one place. Okay. Uh, they and one of the things that they did with the iPhone was that they made it look really cool. Okay. Did they invent
Status symbol,
coolness?
basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They didn't invent cool. Cool's been around for thousands of years, you know. And so what you realize is that people always wanted these benefits. It's just that nobody had those in this context. But that's the point, is that once you start looking at it from a benefit standpoint, all of a sudden you realize that you could develop products with the features that give rise to those benefits.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not that features don't make any difference. They do, but they are the things that give rise to the benefits. But you start with the benefits first. Okay, so, and then we talk about a clear path to growth. We talk about it's really the way to build core competencies, which is Prahalada Hammel's argument, which are the foundations of like big companies having core competencies, are based on having customer benefits. They talk about it specifically in their article about this. Anyway, it's those kinds of ideas. And again, we talk about this all in the first chapter because we think it's really important for people not just to understand what benefits are, but why you should do this. We're obviously big believers in it. And so,
Yeah. Well, Allison, if you could put in the chat, Alan has graciously offered to give the first chapter away if you'll send him an email. So Allison will put that in the chat. And one of the
yeah,
things I love about the book is sometimes it feels like entrepreneurship and innovation is only for the creative. And if I'm not super creative, then I can't play in this space. But as you reframed it for me in looking at benefits, it makes innovation seem more intuitive. It makes it
yeah,
seem less distant.
right,
That's one of the things I appreciated most about the book.
right, right. Well, it's a lot of this stuff is just out there. It's just that people just don't take advantage of it. I mean,
Yeah.
uh, it's like artificial intelligence, why did OpenAI just take off like that? When you look at it from a benefit standpoint, you just go, oh, artificial intelligence has been around for quite a while, but it
Yeah.
never really could take off because it wasn't easy to use. And all of a sudden they just made it like, oh, you just easy to use. You just type in like a little prompt and all of a sudden it's like more productive, ease of use. It's like the benefits are very straightforward. And it just so happens that somebody was able to like put it in the form.
Yeah, and I hope I hope we can teach that benefits approach to AI, because I think it's AI is going to have a huge impact on the world, but if we look at it first from a benefits perspective, the
Right.
innovations and the advances that we'll make leveraging it as a tool on behalf of giving customers the benefits they're looking for, I think there's incredible companies that will be born out of that.
Well, yeah, but what'll happen is that a lot of these companies are still looking backwards into their company,
Yeah.
and they're just assuming that people are really looking for this kind of benefit. And I think a lot of them are making mistakes, but
Yeah.
we'll see.
One of the companies that you talked about was Peloton, and specifically you talk about the perceptual map and why that is so important. Can you describe a little bit more of the perceptual map, and then maybe even take us through Peloton's experience with benefits, especially during COVID?
Yeah. Well, okay, so a perceptual map is is a key to understanding positioning. A lot of people don't realize that when you position a product in the market, it's based on people's perceptions. That it's a perception, you know. And so a perceptual map basically is a map that kind of shows how people in the market perceive you and your competitors on the different benefits that make up the market. So an example was that when I was starting to teach, I made a mistake and I said I would teach the core again right when COVID started at USC. And I was talking about these. I was at that point. We were starting to write the book and everything like that. And so I just asked him. We just jammed on like, what are some benefits that make up this market for like Peloton, the Mirror, and other home exercise market sorts of things. And then what I did was I took the benefits and I chose like about 3 or 4 competitors in that market. And then I use an MTurk. MTurk is done by Amazon, where you can go in and you can say, send me 500 people who exercise 3 times a week. And I had them send it to the site that I built that would allow us to get a perceptual map. And what it shows is, and we have this example in the book, which is exactly how Peloton is perceived versus the Mirror on all of these 5 or 6 benefits. Usually there's about 8 or 10 benefits in a market, but we just, because it was a class, we just did 6 benefits. But you can immediately see how Peloton had done a really good job of being, by advertising and things like that, being perceived as having higher levels of these benefits than their competitors. But you could also see that on certain things like convenience, that Peloton wasn't anywhere near as good as some of their competitors were. And this turns out to be important later on, because if there's a segment that really cares about convenience, you can target that segment and really increase your perceptions of your convenience. Let's say you're the mirror, or you can beat Peloton at its game. But since people are just focusing on features and they don't segment the market, they just kind of like just go, okay, that's that. And of course, when the COVID ended, a lot of the stocks in these companies really went down, because they were basically just providing the same benefits that people were getting by going to gyms and things like that.
One other learning that I had here is, I think naively we think that businesses position themselves in the marketplace, and it really is the customers that end up doing the positioning. And
Right.
so we have to be careful of that, thinking that we're positioning ourselves in a marketplace without the input of the customer really telling us where we fit.
Right,
Pretty interesting.
exactly. No, most companies, when they say I'm positioned, what they're saying is, I think.
We
This is
think,
what they're
yeah,
really saying. I
I hope.
think we're positioned this way. Has nothing to do. It could be absolutely unrelated to the way that they're actually positioned in the market. Unless you have a perceptual map, you're blind to the positioning.
Very
Yeah,
good. Thank you. All right. I have a few more questions. I want to leave
yeah,
the last 15 minutes or so for the audience. So if you guys in the audience would start to put your questions in the chat, we will get to those in just a minute. But I don't want to dominate Alan's
yeah,
attention. So I'll ask another question here. But so as a marketer, you talk about the importance of examining the customer journey. Can you talk
yeah.
us through the steps of the customer journey and what marketers should be paying attention to?
Yeah, well, the customer journey, because we do this in chapter 8, is really to kind of understand, a typical customer journey starts with just problem recognition, and this is true in B2B and B2C. It's everywhere. Somebody just realizes, oh, I have a problem. Okay. And then what they do is they go and they do information search. And then what they do, and this is kind of key, is they create what's known as a consideration set. Okay. This is the formation of a consideration set. And your job, if you're in any business, I mean, you can be I'm talking about a family business. I'm talking about the biggest corporations in America. Your job is to get into the consideration set, because choice is made from the consideration set. Just think about, you go for a car, and before you know it, you just say, okay, I'm thinking about Bolt. I'm thinking about, you know, every other, just a Lexus or something like that. All of a sudden, you've got this consideration set, and the choice is made typically from that set. And then, of course, you have the choice, and then you have the experience, which is the experience, and then you have post-purchase evaluation, if there is such a thing. And then maybe there's repurchase. And the reason why I bring it up, and the reason why we talk about it, is because what you want is you want the benefits that you're going to be standing for. Okay, once you decide who the target segment you're going after, and then what are the benefits that they're looking for, you want to make sure that those benefits are front and center throughout the customer journey. That's the reason why I use Liberty Mutual. If you look at Liberty Mutual, I don't care where you go. If you go on TikTok, you see it. If you go on radio, you hear it. You go wherever you go, throughout the customer journey, they are always there with the same message. Most companies, what they do is first of all, they don't do benefits, and they just kind of like scatter it all over the place. I always think of it as like manna from heaven. They're just hoping. They're hoping that people go, oh yeah, that's exactly what I want. That's
We
exactly what
call
I
that we
want.
call that spray and pray.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. but it's but anyway, so we talk about this, and we talk about like what are the main issues at each of these stages, and also we talk about kind of like how do you get brand recall and other things like that.
So I have a question that was not in our pre-call, but I'm curious, as you're working with executive teams at very large companies, how often are they mad at you? Because you uncover something that is so clear and they're not executing. Like, are they frustrated or are they just ecstatic that now they have this different lens? Like, take us behind the curtain a little bit on the consulting side, and how are they receiving you?
Well, my experience, because what I'm doing is I'm just like showing them the path, and I'm helping them find out the benefits of the market. I'm helping them get the perceptual map, et cetera, et cetera. My experience is that when they see like this is the customer segmentation, okay, you can just see that they almost start like clapping. It's not me. They're not clapping at me. I don't take this personally. Look, I'm a Buddhist mindfulness teacher. I don't take anything personally. What they're doing is they're all of a sudden what they're clapping about is they see the market in a completely different way. Okay. And they realize that in the way that they're seeing it, they can see where their competitors are. And with a perceptual map, they can see where they have an advantage. And so they can see exactly how to position themselves in the market. And so I think they feel very energetic about it. Now, the reality is that I don't work for I work for the company when I'm doing the consulting, but I'm not there when they do the execution. I mean, I leave them with, okay, this is what you have to do. And I have this whole process that I say, this is what you need to do. But if they don't do it, then it won't happen,
Yeah.
right? And so they need to pull the trigger and actually do it. So I've done this I've done it for like two major companies like Texas Instruments and Formix before IBM bought Informix. Yeah, it was fun. It was a lot different.
It seems like it would be a fun process.
Yeah.
I'm going to pause now and see if there's any questions from the audience. If there are, if you would raise your hand and I can call on you. Either that or you can put your question in the chat. Would love to hear your voices on the call. Any questions from the audience? And I love questions that are hypothetical, but are actually about your own situation. So feel free to fire away at that. Alan's not charging consulting fees on this call, so
Yeah.
this is your big
Yeah.
chance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think we're a little bit bashful here. So, oh, there we go. Nick has a question. Thank you, Nick. If you'll take yourself off mute.
Hi, good morning, gentlemen. First, thank you so much for being here and providing this. It's really interesting. And I know I've worked closely with Debbie on some of this. She's really helping me a lot. But I've always been curious about how governments or nonprofits can provide experiential benefits to our customers, right? Which I guess is our community. So can you talk a little bit about that, or have you come across that at all?
Well, no, that's an interesting question. I mean, one thing, as you'll see in the book, is that we say that once you start taking a benefit, it's relevant to any kind of company, including everything from a band to a nonprofit to anything. It's just the nature of benefits. So, if you think about like a national park, for example, okay, you can easily see that it's not so much about functional benefits, like what does it do for me, as much as these kind of experiential benefits, and these symbolic benefits. And I think symbolic benefits are very, very much part of that, because it's like, who do you think you are? You might think you are a person who loves nature. You might be a person who's trying to preserve nature, et cetera. And so that's what I'm saying, is that to get these things, it's really pretty straightforward. You just have to start talking to customers, which a lot of companies, they do only when they're your customer. But, you have to talk to customers who aren't your customers, just to kind of understand like who these people are. And the same goes for like, nonprofits. You can be a nonprofit, you could be a city. You could be a city. I was talking with the mayor of Riverside about this because he's in the PhD program at CDU. And I was saying that, if you're looking for economic development, you could easily imagine, like, what are the benefits? For example, I'll give you a very specific example. They always say, oh, we've got all these universities, we got all this, we got all this stuff. Well, from a customer standpoint, they might just want education. That's the reason why you go to university, or you want something else. But, this is what I'm saying, is that once you start getting past like who you are and start thinking about how the customers, either what it does for them or who they are as individuals or how it makes them feel, then you start realizing it's appropriate for anybody. And,
Nick, I'll add one thing too with the nonprofits. One thing I see that, is particularly fundraising is, in fundraising, the nonprofit talks about what they need, what they're doing. And
right.
If we can just slow down and figure out what are the benefits that this potential donor can get from
Right.
joining our mission, from making this contribution. Is it the psychological, benefit that they're going to receive? Is it recognition that they really want?
Right.
So from a nonprofit standpoint, I think there's a lot of work to be done here. And again, I think tons of untapped potential.
Right. Right.
Thanks for that question, Nick.
Yeah.
Steve,
Thank you
Steve,
both.
you have Steve, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, Ellen. Great,
Oh, thank you,
great
Steve.
presentation. I love what you're talking about here. In regards to perceptual maps, any best practices to let us know when we have a somewhat accurate perceptual map? What's the data set? And just to give you a little context, we're repositioning our outsourced HR hiring service to evolve into more of a strategic offering, which includes more of the organizational coaching development for small to mid-sized businesses, owners. But yeah, if you could, we don't have access to all these folks that we can survey necessarily. But
Well, okay. So let me just say one thing that, and again, I've done this with companies, which is, the first step I would do is find out what are the benefits that make up the market. Okay, that's the main thing. And one thing, if again, this has to be guided very specifically to make sure that people, instead of thinking about their own perceptions, can kind of start thinking about what's going on in the minds of customers. And that really helps if you have salespeople involved and if you have customer service people involved who've actually been in contact with, customers. And if it's done right, you can actually start to get an idea of what the perceptual map looks like, without even going out to end users. Now, the way I've done this, and we actually have a case study in the book about this, where I did it with, I had 50 people from Texas Instruments. This was in Texas Instruments in Europe, and we actually didn't use any customers, but we had salespeople involved and all that. They actually built perceptual maps based on the people who were going through this consulting process that I was taking them through. But then what they did is they took the perceptual map and they went out for 6 weeks and they talked to customers and they showed them the perceptual map to see how it would change, with a real customer, et cetera. And what was surprising was how little the perceptual map changed when they actually presented it to customers, because of the fact that the people who were going through the process really did a good job of getting out of their own heads and thinking about how customers, because you got to be able to see, maybe we think we're really good, but based on talking to customers, they don't perceive us as very good on this. Okay. And so anyway, Steve, you just send me email. Maybe I can help you somehow. Okay.
great.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Appreciate that hypothetical.
Yeah.
Joseph, your hand is up. Please feel free to ask your question.
I have this one question. I just typed and put it so that it becomes easier for all of us to see. How did the brand Lyft and Uber remove the word taxi from the vocabulary to a great extent? Like Xerox, I mean, but before photocopy came, Xerox was there, so I don't really use that word. But how did the brand benefit work here?
Well, that's a really interesting question, because you were the one who put that in the chat, right?
Yep.
That's right.
Yeah. It was really easy for the Lyft, and especially for Uber, because they didn't have to like do a lot of it. It wasn't like the taxi market. The taxi market was kind of old and didn't really do a good job of anything. And so when they came in, all they did was do something really simple. They just said, "Here's our app. We can pay on our app, et cetera, and you can track where the driver is." And before they came out, remember, if you called a taxi, you'd have to like sit there and just go like, where the heck is this taxi? I don't know where it is. Am I going to get to the airport on time? You have no clue. Okay. So by providing these benefits, they didn't even have to make a huge deal about really pushing those benefits. It just completely took off. Now that's different than, like, for example, the Liberty Mutual example, where it's a very dense market and there's a lot of people who are doing a lot of advertising, et cetera. Then you really have to advertise those benefits really strongly to differentiate yourself from all the noise that was out there. Taxis did very little advertising, at that time. But yeah, it was really transformational. I just remember being here in Santa Barbara, and there was taxis driving up and down. Everybody was in opposition to Uber and Lyft. They were just absolutely outraged by it. I remember just looking at them and saying they had access to this for years and they did nothing, and now they're upset.
So the benefits is something which outsmarted everything. So okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Let me see here.
Mercy has a question she just put in the chat. Mercy, actually, if you would want to come on, we'd love to hear your voice.
It's another way of executing design thinking methodology. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not sure design thinking, but my best guess is that design thinking has a methodology, and it might be. I must honestly say I don't know what design thinking methodology is, but let's just say that maybe if you explain that, or if you just took the ideas that I was talking about and see if that applies in design thinking, that would be useful. Or Mercy, if you want to email me, just email me, and in the meantime I'll look up what design thinking methodology is and see if I can help you with that.
Thank you for your question, Mercy. Any other questions from the audience? Appreciate the participation. This is fun. All right. I have one more question, and then we'll open it back up for just a minute. So, Alan, clearly everyone's interested in growth. Every business is interested in growth. As you think about the different avenues for growing a brand,
right.
What really should be considered and why? Yeah.
Okay. So we show 3 paths to growth in our book, and the first one is brand. We call it brand strength. And what we really mean is that, again, this comes from the perceptual map. A lot of people think that the way to grow is you've got to differentiate from competitors. Okay, that's the typical way of thinking. Okay, the way I got to do is I got to differentiate. I got to have more, and that's all. Again, it's all backward thinking. It's back looking in your company. But if you understand the perceptual map, the first thing that you'll see in a perceptual map is there's usually a lot of space between how people perceive you and how much room there is at the top, how much more they could perceive you like that. So let's just take it as ease of use as a benefit, okay? If you do a perceptual map, you'll probably find that most of the products on the market are like maybe a 4 out of 10 on ease of use. Brand strength is basically saying, okay, I'm gonna go after the segment that cares about ease of use, and I'm gonna make myself be perceived as being the strongest at ease of use, okay? And that's what we call brand strength. Okay. There's another way, which is the more classic way of growing, is through brand extensions. You might think of Gerber, who was in baby food and is now in all types of baby care. Patagonia, who started off in climbing gear and then went into clothing and equipment. And there's tons of examples of this. And so we go through these different examples of brand extensions as a way to grow. And this becomes very obvious once you understand the benefits, okay? Because what happens is when you're very strong on a benefit, then what happens is you can take usually that benefit and find other markets where that benefit is also desired, okay? And so that's a way to kind of extend your brand. Then the third way is called brand admiration. And Debbie has a book on this, which is all about brand admiration. If you look at the most admired brands in the world, okay, who are the most admired brands? What they found was that these were brands who had functional, symbolic, and experiential benefits, all three of them, okay? And when they had all three of them, so it was like, not only what does it do for me, but it connects with who I am and how I feel. You know, you might think of it as love, trust, and respect, you know, that this together makes for the most admired brands. And
what are some examples, Alan, of admired brands? I mean, is like Ritz-Carlton admired brand in that way? I'm just trying to think.
Well,
who might make that list?
Yeah. Well, Apple is a classic example. But you know, when I've done this, like I usually, sometimes I do a strategy workshop. I usually ask everybody in the room, I said, well, what brands do you really admire? And, you know, and everybody comes up with stuff, everything from Chick-fil-A to, you know, it could be anything. Okay. Yeah. And then when we go through, they start seeing, oh, because a Chick-fil-A has, you know, this kind of functional benefit because I have to eat something, so it solves the problem. But there's something symbolic about it. There's an experiential experience, you know, and they start realizing that when they're all three together, and usually at high levels, that these are the most admired brands. And of course, if you have an admired brand, then you can't. Competition is very hard to come in, and so. Yeah, so we talk about all three of those: brand strength, brand extensions, and brand admiration as three different paths to growth. They're all based on benefits.
I love it. Well, our time has escaped us, Alan. It has flown by. Again, if you want to go deeper into these things, please just pick up Alan's book, The Brand Benefits Playbook.
Yeah, it's a really easy book to read.
It is an easy read. Yeah, and very practical. I loved how practical and approachable it was, and the fact that I could apply it in so many different ways. In my life, you know. So, Alan, really appreciate you joining us on Authors at Drucker.
Thank you,
audience. Grateful for your participation. I'm going to share my screen one last time. And tell you a little bit about what's happening next month. Next month, we will be joined by Dennis Jaffe, and we're going to talk about his book, Cross Cultures, How Global Families Negotiate Change Across Generations. I'm really looking forward to this conversation with Dennis, and appreciate you all giving of your most precious asset, which is your time and your attention to us today.
Thank you.
Alan, thank you so much for spending this time with us and helping us to learn about benefits.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your time. I understand that's a precious resource too. Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely. Have a great day, everyone.
All right. Take care.